Hey guys, John Adamson with Seeking Light. Hopefully this is going to work better this time. But anyway, starting over again. I wanted to just cover something related to for my channel, viral video on my religious exemption submission, which has really gained some traction. And periodically I'll get somebody still commenting on it, even though that video is 2 months old now. And so this gentleman, I'm assuming gentleman based on the name, commented on my video, "You all should get arrested for involuntary manslaughter." And I'm not just commenting on him, because I've heard this very same argument from many, many people. And so I wanted to address this. But first I'm going to read the conversation that I had with a little bit of back and forth, because sometimes I can interact with people that are posting comments. So he said, "You all should get arrested for involuntary manslaughter." So I said, "What data do you have to support such an accusation? Have you ever spread the flu by your actions? If so, were you able to determine that it completed its transmission cycle without killing anyone?" And then without addressing that particular question, he went on to say, "Data plus 90% of ICU patients are unvaccinated COVID carriers." Now, the question is, are they really? Anecdotally, there have been some people that have said that they lied about having the magic fairy dust. So that is a questionable stat. The CDC confirms the magic fairy dust does reduce the spread. You use the other term. Spread causes deaths, therefore involuntary manslaughter. So first of all, some of this is not confirmed, and secondly, some of this, what was shared there, has been challenged. So let's continue. I said, we're no longer seeing those numbers. What was I saying? Oh yeah, the ICU. And I based that on what I'm seeing reported from hospitals. There are viable, proven therapeutics that provide evidence-based protections used by other countries that have comparable outcomes. There is proven better evidence of long-lasting protection from spread related to natural immunity, which many of us have. My question remains, have you ever spread the flu, and can you verify you've caused no inadvertent deaths? Then he said, "I've taken all reasonable steps via a comprehensive fairy dust," I almost said the word, "program for all diseases. Therefore, I'm not reckless and can't be charged with involuntary manslaughter." So he's still positing that, those of us that don't get a certain fairy dust can be charged with involuntary manslaughter. And I said, "And I take all necessary precautions, including Fluvax, fairy dust, and having natural immunity, as well as taking other preventative measures, vitamin D, keeping a healthy weight, hand sanitation, masking around vulnerable people, etc., to prevent unnecessary spread." And then here's what else I said to him. The problem with all these measures, including vaccination, is that all people can still transmit. You can still be culpable for inadvertently killing someone, regardless of your fairy dust status. Your logic assumes you're absolutely perfect in your prevention of spread and posits that by dint of said status, you will bear 0% responsibility for any viral spread, and the fairy dusted bear 100%, and the unfairy dusted is what I meant, bear 100% responsibility. Your logic lacks scientific backing, and we've seen this in more recent studies. And such ignorance is dangerous if it leads to public policy in holding unvaccinated as solely accountable in viral spread. Sorry, guys, I keep getting notifications. I'm flipping them out of the way. Then he finished up with this. I know it's not perfect, but seatbelts don't fully prevent deaths, but we are required to wear them to help. Not wearing a seatbelt is reckless. If you don't wear one, the police can find you for acting in a reckless manner. Vaccination is the same. Whilst my involuntary manslaughter penalty is clearly extreme, my point is still valid. Okay, so at least he starts to see the implausibility of charging somebody for involuntary manslaughter. And I'm always about not going to an extreme with this statement, because there are people that believe the way this gentleman does, that those of us that remain unfairy dusted have culpability, and therefore we should be charged with crimes for our position. I had a friend, this relates back to the recent last November election, and I had a friend on one of the social media platforms who triumphed to the point where he said that those of us who disagreed with him should be in basically concentration re-education camps. And he was quite serious. And I challenged him on that. So basically he was saying thought police should be rounding up those of us who disagreed with him. And so you make statements like this on a social media platform. And if that idea gains traction, like if you disagree with me or you do something that I don't like, even though it's legal, I have the right to come after you, including the use of the law, like, for example, charging you with involuntary manslaughter. I want to address a couple things that he brings up. He brings up the whole idea of car seatbelts. Let me give you an actual statistic, okay, and how this is not comparable to the fairy dust. This is from the National Highway Transportation Safety Agency. So this is our government agency that actually tracks these things. It says, for occupants in SUVs, pickups, vans, seatbelts reduce the risk of fatal injury to the driver and front seat passenger by 60%. Now, why is that significant? Because 60% reduction is an absolute reduction number. So in other words, you have a potential of 60% more likely to die if you're not wearing a seatbelt in a crash versus somebody that is. So that is a pretty significant reduction, right? But it pales in comparison to the minuscule absolute percentage afforded by being fairy dusted. So let me give you some actual stats. Okay. Of the whole world's population, this is based on numbers at a glance through the World Health Organization. So far in the world, there have been confirmed cases of those having the ick, 243,260,214. This is according to the World Health Organization. Of those, that number, confirmed deaths from the ick are 4,941,039. So those are confirmed deaths. And if you do the math, that is 2.1% of confirmed cases. We're not talking about those who actually had it. We're just people that have actually had the test to confirm the ick, which is probably not even close to the total number of people who actually had it. Because a lot of people had it, never got tested, or they had it and then they got tested for antibodies to the ick, and then they never, because it had been too long, they didn't test positive for the ick, therefore they're not counted as a case. So we know that confirmed cases is not anywhere near the number of actual. So these numbers are less optimistic that I'm sharing with you than probably the reality is. So what that means is about 2.1% of people worldwide who have had the ick died. 2.1%. Most groups under the age of 65 have a survivorship of around better than 99%. If you catch the ick, you're about 99% likely that you're going to be okay. The only group that's under that is over 65s. Theirs goes down to about 89%. So they have about a 1 in 10 chance of survival from the ick over 65. Now think about your population. Most of them are going to have comorbidities. In fact, we know the average number of comorbidities for those who pass from the ick are around 4 total. So let's look at some other statistics. So there is, if you get the fairy dust, there is a 99.9% chance of survivorship, possibly. Sorry, I keep getting these messages. Anyway, 99% chance of survivorship, according to what we know. Now, the chance, now what they've said, now actually I made that number up. I apologize. Let me back up. So let us say, because I'm doing this for math, because what we've been told by the CDC is that non-fairy dusted people are 11 times more likely to die. Anthony Fauci recently came out with some stat that like you're 56 more times likely to die. He based that on a really narrow set of numbers and from a very narrow window of time. And anyway, there's some question about that stats. But the one true number that we've gotten from the CDC recently is 11 times more likely. Okay, so let's assume that. And let's assume a survivorship, if you've gotten the fairy dust, of 99.9%. Now, the way that they come up with 11 times is through what's called relative comparison. Not whole percentage comparison, but relative comparison. So if they're saying 99.9% survive because they got the fairy dust, and they're saying you're 11 times more likely to die, what that means is you would be 1.1% likely to die from the ick if you weren't fairy dusted. That's what 11 times would mean in that particular case. So think about that. Relative percentage is pretty low. Now, what else do we know related to, and I'm starting to ramble, so let me try to wrap this up. What else do we know about the mindset of this guy that's problematic? You could go back for any disease and try to find where either somebody caused it and it ultimately led to the death of somebody, and say, oh, well, you got the flu, you passed it to somebody else, it killed my grandfather, therefore you're culpable. You got polio, and because you weren't vaccinated, you caused somebody else to catch polio. They ended up dying from it because of paralysis of the respiratory muscles. You can go on and on and on. And what the problem with that mindset is, there are so many other killers out there. You would have to put yourself in saran wrap, isolated from everybody, on some kind of HEPA filter respirator to perfectly clean the air that you're blowing out to, and not touch anything or anybody to potentially prevent them from catching anything. But the fact of the matter is that's not going to happen. So is it possible that any one of us could inadvertently have contracted a virus or a bacteria, passed it on to somebody else, and killed them ultimately? And the answer is yes, it's possible. It's a very dangerous thing, though, to say that my action of not taking the fairy dust might lead to the death of somebody, therefore I should be brought up on charges of involuntary manslaughter. To challenge this gentleman and his concern is the recent studies that have come out from the CDC that point out that it is very possible for you to pass on the ick quite easily and at the same frequency if you are fairy dusted as opposed to those that are not fairy dusted. It does not matter. And one of the things that one of the studies found was that you're more likely, because of minimalizing of your symptoms, having had the fairy dust, to be a little bit more free in your actions, more likely to go out in public and maybe throw caution to the wind because you have had the fairy dust and therefore you couldn't possibly have it. Although now people are becoming more aware of that. So anyway, this is a concern. I'm going to explore this topic more in the future because this whole idea of holding people culpable for transmissible diseases, there's an infinite regression of blame. Oh, and by the way, who else is potentially to blame? And really, this is the root cause of all of this. The lab which shall not be named in a country which we shall not say anything against because they're good buddies of this platform. They created it. And the doctor which shall be venerated knew about the funding for the gain of function. I say it like that on purpose, but he's fully culpable in what he did, knowing the research that was going on and knowing the origin likely bears a huge portion of the responsibility for not just one potential death, but where are we at? Oh yeah, almost 5 million, according to the World Health Organization. So just some food for thought. Anyway, thanks for hanging with me. This is John Adamson with Seeking Light. Take care and God bless.